The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is brought to you by Compton Group, a specialist recruitment agency working in the metal, manufacturing and engineering sectors. Hey guys, Pete and Mike.
The Metal Guys.
Joined today by Liam Conway. Welcome back to the show, Liam. Greenfields Energy Group, new business.
Yep.
When we last spoke, it was 2022. The energy market was chaotic.
Yep.
To say the least. Let's just start with, where are we at the moment? 2024, we're in Feb. Where is the energy market currently?
I think we've definitely got out of what was a chaotic time for sure. In terms of wholesale costs now, so we're talking about wholesale costs for electricity and gas, they are the lowest they have been for the last 3 years. So there's lots of stuff in the news about prices being lower than when the Ukraine-Russia conflict kicked off, and we are broadly there. Last time I was talking to you, it was the complete opposite of that, wasn't it? 2022.
Well, I've got figures here.
Bonkers.
90p a unit.
Well, so now, for that would have been for electricity.
Correct.
You're seeing sub 20p. So typically, depending on the size of a client and what they consume, 17 to 20p would be about par. Now, some of the challenge for that is there's a few people who signed up at those stupidly high rates, but there's plenty of people who signed up at 60, 70p for electricity on sort of longer term deals. That's buying them big time, particularly if their competition has now got out the other side. You know, company A still in a contract of 60, 70p, their competitors in at 20p, some big numbers.
What was you advising people to do at that time? What was, you know, like when you say people were tying in and perhaps biting them on the backside, what was, as yourself, as what was you seeing at that time to advise people to do?
So for both electricity and gas, we were advising flexible energy contracts. Now, with a fixed contract, as what it says on the tin, you sign a contract for a set period of time and you've got a known cost. But at that time, when the market was exceptionally high, you're paying a massive premium for that. So our advice, and this is when myself and my business partner were at our previous employer where we were working previously, our advice was to certainly purchase flexibly, so it meant that you didn't have to buy all of your energy in one go. And now it's easy for me to sit here to you guys and say, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but
it is
a wonderful, it absolutely is. But I was getting my face in as many places as possible, and there's lots of recordings online of me basically saying this stuff. Do not sign a fixed contract, because it literally could have, and in some cases has, ended some businesses. You know, I remember at that time, you've got second, third, fourth, fifth generation family businesses knackered solely on energy. Now, if they've been able to survive that, it certainly looks a lot better for them now.
For people that are maybe not so aware of buying energy for businesses, most people's experience of energy, I think, is just, I need to renew online. You go to one of the comparison sites, or you typically went to one of the comparison sites, and you just picked the cheapest or the cheapest from a known source.
Or the one that was at the top of the list.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, or the one that was at the top. So, crudely, what are the significant differences between buying your energy privately and what businesses should be looking at? Just
to put this in perspective, so typical clients for us spend anywhere at the low end £100,000 a year on energy up to 5 million. Our real sweet spot is probably $250,000 to 5 million energy spend is our typical client. And by that very nature, you know, it's very different to us spending, I don't know, $2,000 a year at home. It's just a completely different beast. But some of the reasons it's completely different is that the charging structures are just vastly, vastly different. You know, at home, you'll see a day rate, you might have a night rate, you'll have a standing charge, jobs are good in. For electricity, you can have contracts that have got 30 odd cost lines in them. So the structures of those contracts are just vastly different. And the other thing, going back to that flexible contract, you know, at home, you'd be provided with a 1 or 2 year probably fixed contract. Commercial clients, providing they're large enough, can just buy in a completely different way. And one of the other big things is that, so certainly for commercial energy, there are two elements. So you've got wholesale costs. So that's the stuff that everyone sees in the news. Wholesale costs are going down, wholesale costs are going up. But that only really makes up about half of the delivered cost. And you see that more from the commercial world. So you've got things like distribution costs, transmission costs, taxes, levies, and they've only ever gone up. So we help people typically get their head around those costs and make sure that the contract structure is the best it can be for them.
I think when I look personally, because of my circumstances, I look at that rate that you pay per day, which has fluctuated quite a lot over the last couple of years, generally because I'm only at home probably half the time. So for me, I'm thinking, well, I'm not using energy at all half of the time, so I'd rather keep that unit cost low. Give us an idea of like some of those different lines, because as I say, personally, I'm just looking and thinking, that's the cost, that's the day rate. There's not really much, and I haven't got much choice. And also, I don't really care that much either. So, you know, what are the kind of the significant things that businesses need to be looking out for? And again, of those, say, 30 variables, what are maybe the key ones?
Although there could be, for electricity, certainly like 30 cost elements of an invoice, actually there's not really anything you can do about them. They are what they are. But different suppliers will structure a contract in different ways, and that's what you really need to be on top of, I would say. To be honest, I think we spend more of our time educating businesses as to why those costs have gone up. So, for example, it wouldn't be uncommon for a business coming out of, let's say, a 3-year electricity contract. They might be paying 40 grand a year in standing charges currently. Well, on the next contract, that could be 6 figures easily. And they look at that and think, the supplier's taking the piss here, basically. Why have my costs gone up so much? And they think they're getting fleeced. But it's only when you then sit down with them and explain the reasons why it's gone up, and they're still not very happy it's gone up, obviously. But once they understand the reasons why those costs have gone up, and they realise there's nothing they can do about it, a lot of what we do is about educating people.
Well, educate us then. So we're at Mike Bolton Engineering. We use a load of lecky.
Yeah.
We've just come out of our tariff. We were sweet because we were on a long-term tariff, so we've missed all these undulations, and now it's going to go up.
So the stuff we're talking about here is around standing charges and distribution charges. So where we're sat now, Western Power are the network operator. So you might see the Western Power's vans kicking about. So what's basically happened is there's something called targeted charging review. That comes in April, and businesses are massively affected by that. Without boring you to absolute tears on that, commercial clients have what's called an available supply capacity. Think of it as the size of the cable, the juice that can go into a business. Small business might have 100 kVA supply, big business might have 3,000 kVA supply. And that is now setting what some of your standing charges and distribution charges are via this review. But, you know, as I said, people look at it and think, a supplier's just milking this here. Actually, they're not at all. And it all came about because people like Western Power, if you can believe it, were expecting X amount of revenue. They didn't get X amount of revenue because there used to be something called triad charges. And particularly manufacturers were able to mitigate some of those charges. They were avoid the charges because basically there's 3 high peaks throughout winter. Manufacturers could do what you call load shedding. So between 4 and 7 is an expensive time to use electricity. They'd move it into overnight. You know, they'd run lights out overnight. Good for them, making it cheaper for them. But actually Western Power weren't getting the revenue that they were expecting, and therefore they've now change that whole structure and how that is charged to an unavoidable charge. So not just manufacturers, but particularly manufacturers had worked a way to reduce some of their costs. Good for them, but actually it's now coming back to bite them in a different way in unavoidable charges. So not only did we have a point where wholesale costs were going up exceptionally high, and as I said earlier, you know, they're definitely down now, but all the other stuff has gone up massively as well. So it's like, you know, when you see, you hear in the news wholesale costs have come down 20%, let's just say, that doesn't mean that your overall costs in your business have come down 20%. It's probably only more like 10%, because if 20%, if the commodity has dropped 20%, but that only makes up half of your overall cost, you're actually only looking at 10% decrease. So when people see stuff like that in the news, they get riled up by it, because and then you see stuff like, BP are making crazy money and all that stuff. So a lot of what we do is about educating people to make sure that they understand that the costs are correct.
Do you suffer from any of these problems? Are you asking around your office trying to find a new supplier or source materials? Have you got aged or high-priced stock that you'd like to liquidate anonymously? Or would you like new business from customers that are guaranteed to pay you for your materials? If the answer to any of the above is yes, then you'll be pleased to know that the Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is sponsored by SteelBuy. SteelBuy are a digital platform revolutionising the way businesses trade metal products online. SteelBuy offers risk-free trading where sellers are guaranteed to be paid, and automated processing including certification, logistics and invoicing. The network of vetted buyers and sellers is continually growing, and it's all housed in an easy-to-use trading platform accessible on any device. The online business-to-business marketplace for products is rapidly gathering pace, and SteelBuy are ideally positioned to capture the changing demands of steel buyers. So check out SteelBuy today and be part of the future of metal trading. Now let's jump back into the podcast.
What's it like being selling it? Obviously, the last few years, it must have been quite nice for you. But before that, how important was people looking at their electric costs? We see a lot of you now educating, speaking to people, webinars, which is all great for you. But prior to that, how difficult was it to go and speak to some of these manufacturing sites about electric?
Yeah, it was definitely more challenging because. So let's just say someone was spending £500,000 a year on electricity, for argument's sake. The difference historically between a good year and a bad year might have been 5-10%. And whilst that 5-10% is clearly better in their pocket than not, it's not really going to make a difference to the business. But when your £500,000 goes to £2,500,000, actually that starts to seriously impact. And I think what we've seen when people really needed help, a lot of energy brokers were still just encouraging people to sign fixed long-term contracts.
Because they were getting good commission.
Well, it's not even really that, because the commission, depending on what commission and fee margin you put into the deal, you're going to get that whether it's a fixed contract or a flex contract anyway. But it was just crap advice.
Right.
It's just horrific advice. So I think people have been done over big time on the advice that they got, and not even just the advice, more the options. So at that time, and even now, if you're just presented with, right, here's a 3-year fixed contract, sign this for me, mate, cheers, I'll come and speak to you again in 18 months, 2 years' time. If that's your only option, you're not really getting, they're just doing a crap job for you.
I suppose for a lot of people, it's like, if what you're saying there only goes up 5 to 10%, no one's really, once they've set up the business, they're not really ever looking at energy, are they? So it's like when it comes to the point where it's gone to £2.5 million, for that example, it's like you don't really have a supply chain, do you? It's like you're just almost like, well, what do I do? You're looking and you're almost speaking to your other pals and you're almost all following each other, but you're not, all of you might be.
And there was a lot of, there's a lot of, and I get this, there's a lot of people sense checking what they were being told. So let's say you were running an engineering business or whatever, and I'd worked with you for 5-10 years, and you thought I was the best thing since sliced bread, obviously.
Yes.
But then you were faced with that level of increase. You're far more likely to sense check that just to make sure that actually, is Liam telling me, is this really correct?
What do you mean when you're saying sense check?
So go and speak to another broker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If I'm coming to you and saying, right, your costs are going up by 500%, no matter how much of a nice guy you might think I am, you're probably going to do a bit of due diligence around that.
What did you used to do?
Some people did.
Your factory, your warehouse. Why did you used to do it? Did you used to go for a broker?
We didn't. I mean, it probably sounds terrible, really, but I used to look at electricity the same way companies in the Far East looked at labour. They just didn't look at it as a cost. It's just like, I've got to pay my lecky.
Yeah.
And it costs X. And you'd basically get one price, you might compare it, and you'd be like, yeah, that'll do. Because it never seemed to be that much.
No.
Relatively speaking, but then if you're going back like 10 years, yeah.
And also people's strategy, they were just working how they'd always worked, which typically, so energy contracts typically renew 1st of April or 1st of October. Broadly, it's 1st of October. And businesses would just have like a reminder, 3 months before, time to sort energy contracts. Even if they were spending millions of pounds a year, some of the people you think were probably some of the most sophisticated buyers were probably doing it in the most just appalling way, really.
Do you think though, because look, we've spoke before we got on this pod, and we've obviously known each other a little while now, and obviously from a couple of years ago when I was first speaking to yourself, the market seems to have changed. It seems that like buying behaviour has changed around this. If we're looking at it as a commodity, this electric or gas. Why do you think things have changed so much? Was it just because of the situation that we had in 2022? Or do you think people are just getting more sophisticated with their buying anyway? Or is it people like yourself actually going out there and trying to start changing the way the markets run? Because we still get it. As a small business here, like we don't use a lot. Obviously we're not the kind of person that you'd be dealing with, but it literally is still that. You get 3 months before, some guy starts ringing you on the phone and saying, you're due to come out your contract, I need to get you signed up ASAP, because otherwise you go on to a deem rate and it's going to cost you money. And that's it.
Yeah.
I didn't even bother speaking to anyone else. You're just like, okay, send me some deals over and I'll just check it online. And I'm talking to you and I'm still not even thinking I can be bothered.
Yeah.
So why is it changing?
I think it changed because the impact to businesses was literally life or death. And that's not an exaggeration. There's plenty of businesses that I know that have gone out of business purely on the back of energy costs. So yes, we're mainly through it now and the costs have come down considerably. But people, I don't know how long this will last, by the way, but I reckon people are scarred by the fact that they realise how close they did get to perhaps going under just on energy. So the smart ones are now, they're just more engaged with it because they realise if they get it wrong again, that could be it.
What are you advising people to do at the moment? Obviously, you've got your webinar on Thursday, haven't you? Obviously, you've put a lot of like free content out there for people to read. Like what, if someone was listening to this now and they were like, "Well, it needs to be," perhaps never heard of you or whatever. What type of, what are you advising people to do as it stands?
So this isn't a cop out, but there is some sense behind what I'm going to say.
It's a total cop out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a total cop out. Yeah. Ring me and we'll talk.
Just for the listeners here, I saw his eyes go everywhere there.
It depends on the business, because if you're large enough, I think there's a conversation to be had about flexible purchasing, but equally, so when we're speaking to somebody, we always start with, here are the fixed prices. So here's what your costs are going to look like, whether it's a 12-month, 24-month, or 36-month contract. If those prices in terms of the cost works for you as a business, if you can stay operational, you can win business, you can retain business, you don't want to have sleepless nights over energy, just sign a fixed contract. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. We use that phrase a lot. Look how far the market has come off. So we'll sit with someone, we'll have lots of nice pretty graphs which basically say we're the lowest we've been for the last 3 years. What more are you hoping for? Just get the bloody thing done.
Yeah.
And also for manufacturers, in an ideal world, they'd have fixed costs typically for as long as they could, as long as those costs work for them as a business. So it's sort of swung the complete opposite way, whereas before we were saying don't sign fixed contracts. Now there's real value in signing fixed contracts in our view, but there are certain businesses who have been on flexible contracts, have really seen the value of it, and they're large enough to continue with that, and then we risk manage that for them. But I would say the vast majority of clients now, I'm probably talking 80+%, will just be signing fixed contracts, and typically that's 2 or 3 year fixed contracts.
Because I look at it the same way as I looked at currency conversion. When I was importing large chunks of material, high value, you're almost hedging your money. You're thinking, well, I've got maybe 3 currencies, euros, dollars, sterling, and where do I want that money?
Yeah.
The market's always changing, it's always fluctuating, hopefully not as drastically as 2022 energy. But we would always use a broker, and there's loads of them. Everyone gets rung up by Forex traders daily.
We still get it now, don't we?
Yeah,
I still get them. Yeah, we still get them here, don't we? Yeah. My mindset was always, we use a broker, and we look at rates. Sometimes we look forward based on 3 month, 6 month lead time from a mill, and we kind of get an idea and we speak with you. So we would never use a fixed. We wouldn't be thinking, right, I'll fix my money necessarily now, because you want to sometimes play the market a little bit with it.
But you fix it when it's the right time. And I think the advice piece is you need to be having constant conversation with whoever's giving you advice in that field, whether it's accountants, solicitor, forex, energy. You're paying for someone's expertise. At least pretty listen to it.
Yeah. But that's what I was going to say. So, when you're talking about risk management of it, when you look at those bigger ones who can afford, like, what's involved in that? Are they ringing you all the time? Are you looking at like the...
So again, this is my cop out, but it would depend. Client,
that's two.
Yeah, that's two. Yeah, 3 on you out.
Yeah, but let's just say I'm a company, right?
Yeah,
I've got 5 machines.
Yeah,
24-hour manufacturing business, 5 days a week. And you're going to me, I can probably risk it. Like, what type of service do people get from a broker? You're dealing with a company, they're doing a short term. What is it like? You're just looking at it as it's coming to the end of the short term? Are there people having conversations with you every couple of weeks or so? How does it work?
So for flexible contracts, typically they're longer term framework. So the difference between a fixed contract is you sign on one day for a contract for, say, a 3-year period, does what it says on the tin. A flexible contract, think of it as a framework. So you're signing to say this supplier is going to be supplying me with electricity or gas, and I will tell them when I would like to buy some or all of my energy.
And are you signed, just to drill into that, you might be signed in, say, for 5 years or 3? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so they're typically between 3 and 5 years. In an ideal scenario, you want that framework to be as far out as possible, because what you're typically working towards is a budget. So that's where the risk bit comes in. So you're looking at what cost makes sense to us and how are we going to structure purchases so we get to that, and how much risk are we willing to take in terms of leaving volume open that leaves us exposed. Now, you could be exposed, and that could be a good thing, because if it's in a falling market, if you haven't made all of your purchases, you'll be floating, and if the market is falling, you're just taking the prevailing market rate. Risk management can be quite complex. So we've got clients that we have weekly calls with, we have some have monthly. Some it might be 6 monthly, but typically they're going to be weekly or monthly calls, because more often than not, we're talking at least people are spending $500,000 plus as a minimum level for that kind of product.
The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is sponsored by TW Metals. TW Metals are a stockholder and distributor of nickel alloy, aluminium, titanium and stainless steel products in a range of forms, including tube, bar, pipe, extrusion, as well as sheet and plates. They have sites located in the UK, Europe, the USA and Southeast Asia, and are the largest supplier of aerospace tubes globally. With a whole host of accreditations and in-house processing capabilities, they are the first choice for OEMs, tier 1s, fabricators and engineering companies across the world, and they're easy to deal with. I worked with them for many years, so I can recommend them. For more details, check out their website or even give them a call to chat about your requirements. Now let's get back to the pod.
We spoke a little bit earlier about personal energy, business energy, and the separation between those two. I wanted to talk about the caps. When we were last chatting, I believe it was called the Energy Bill Relief Scheme. This was what the government brought in to say, look, we're not going to let the price go above X. It then changed to the Energy Bills Discount Scheme, which was nowhere near as advantageous to people, but it was kind of a halfway house between these super high prices and getting people through to being able to take a contract.
Yeah.
Did those schemes, do you think they helped? Do you think that they actually helped companies avoid going to the wall at that point? How successful were they? Now we're a couple of years down the line.
So the first scheme absolutely did. So... if it wasn't for that, I honestly dread to think what would have happened. There would have been businesses just closing daily. It was that extreme. The second scheme, neither use nor ornament really. But it only really, the people who were getting the relief on the second scheme were probably people who signed into long-term or longer-term fixed contracts when they shouldn't have. But the first scheme absolutely kept industry
afloat
going. Honestly, I cannot stress if if that wasn't in place, I honestly tried to think what would have happened.
What was it like working through at that time? If like to just take this information and make sure that you're an expert at all times.
Well, I mean, we were doing early morning calls, late night calls with people. It was challenging. It was more challenging because you were, I think, as I said earlier, you're speaking to people who've got second, third, fourth, fifth generation family businesses. Like, this could be it. That was odd. You had people who were literally crying on the phone in calls and Teams calls and stuff with you. Just this sheer disbelief at what had happened. Now, some of those businesses, whilst I didn't say this to them at the time, some of them have got themselves to look at on some of the decisions and stuff that they made. But, think about that. You being, your third generation, your dad, your granddad's run a business, you're now running it as MD, and something that's going on in energy could end up. It's a big thing. You employ 50, 100 staff, energy could have just wiped the whole business.
But then those people can make a decision. I know if they're like in finance, it's going to cause financial difficulty. At least if they're having a chat with you in that morning, they can do a deal with you. What's it like with the people who are PLCs, your big corporates? How are they? How quick could they make a decision? Would they be able talking to you then going, the next day, a week later, they're going, the deal's changed again? Because there must have been loads of those.
So, to be fair, we don't really deal with many large PLCs because there's not really the space that we're keen on operating in. But at that time, so I generally, if you didn't have a contract back from a client within almost an hour, it's probably null and void. But that's hard as well, isn't it? So let's say, go back to the examples I said earlier, you're currently spending 500 grand a year. Now it's going for 2.5 million quid. I need this back within an hour. Just imagine the pressure of that decision-making process for businesses. But what I will say is that some brokers played on that.
Of course.
So they played on the fact that actually, if you don't get this back to me in the next hour, it ain't 2.5 million quid, it's 2.6.
But I suppose in one way, legitimately, that was happening. So as much as pressure, it's almost like, there must have been people who rang you back in blocks a day later.
There's a balance between encouraging people to understand the severity of the situation and harassing and hounding and piling on excessive pressure just to get a deal done.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to it in not necessarily the pressure and the adverse selling practices, but with nickel, there's been plenty of times that you'll have known yourself that when things are being bought and that commodity's moving around quickly, sometimes prices were valid for 24 hours and stuff like that, and you just had to get your purchase on quick. And then mills would come back to you and say, actually, we haven't been able to buy at the price that we said, and we've got to charge you more. It's tough.
Yeah, people were signing contracts. Even if you signed a contract, doesn't mean the contract's locked in. You could sign the contract, get the paperwork back. You still got to go to the supplier to get countersigned and locked in. And that was often it was a challenge. But we're in a slightly different world now where you don't have to act quite as quickly as you were at that time.
Now, you said prices have obviously dropped right down now. So pre-Ukraine war levels doesn't always mean that the price is necessarily. Or is it fully lower now?
This could be my third cop. It depends on what you're coming out of. But broadly, I would say electricity, you're probably 10 to 20% higher all in than sort of 3-ish years ago. Gas, you're probably still double, I would say.
Because I'm looking, again, personal here, which was where I was kind of going about 10 minutes ago, was... you're still seeing caps being put in place. There was caps on personal.
Yeah.
And that's still around now. And part of me always thinks as soon as there's a cap, companies will just try and get people to the cap as quickly as possible. And they kind of use that because obviously the prices have gone up significantly for personal households. So is that kind of where we are at the moment, that energy companies are still trying to take advantage of these caps and just try and hit those caps as quick as possible?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea about the domestic market. So okay. I don't know.
Fair.
I'm not going to try and blag that one. But you don't have caps in the commercial world.
Yeah.
But what you are seeing now is you're seeing more suppliers back in the game and in the game competitively. So when the world was absolutely losing its mind over energy costs, suppliers were just pulling out. They just weren't interested. And I get why. It's just risk. Having volume on your books was risk at that moment in time. Whereas now you're seeing people back in the market and pricing competitively to win business, and anytime there's a competitive market is a good thing for the end user.
Now you've been posting a lot of examples of refunds, working with a client, short space of time, X amount of money, and they're quite substantial, some of them 6 figures, some of them. Talk to us about that.
So one of the reasons I really focus on manufacturers is certain manufacturers can get energy tax relief. There's something called climate change levy, and you'll see it on their invoice. It's called CCL. Now, there's a 15-page HMRC guidance on this. If anyone wants to go and
do some
catch some Zeds, then go and read that. But effectively, if you do some of these manufacturing processes, you can get CCL relief. It means, firstly, that a proportion of that cost will be removed from your ongoing invoices. But more importantly, and sort of the glamorous headline figures to that mean that you can also get 4 years worth of refunds of that relief. And they can be pretty substantial. Now, more and more businesses know about it. It's not like a dark hidden secret per se, but it's like anything. If you don't know, you don't know. So if I'm sitting with a prospective business, and let's say they are a metal pressings business, because pressings is a qualifying process, and we sat around the table and we look at their invoices, and I see electricity, £2,000 a month in CCL charges, we know that there's an opportunity to remove all or a proportion of that and then get them a refund
for 4 years.
And any time that you can go to business and get them a chunky old refund, you're in the good books from the get-go.
Generally, yeah. People like that.
You're doing something wrong if they don't think you've done a good job there, aren't you? You know?
The Metal Guys Talk Business podcast is brought to you by Compton Group, a recruitment agency operating in the metal, manufacturing and engineering sectors. With a large, engaged network of candidates and clients, we help businesses make great hires in sales, operational, technical, quality and managerial roles, as well as assisting people in their careers by matching their unique skills and aspirations to businesses that are hiring. Having worked with more than 200 niche businesses since 2019, Compton Group have become the go-to recruitment partner for many of our industry's leading names. So talk to us about your next career move, or let us work with you on your business's next hire. Compton Group, powering employment in the metal, manufacturing and engineering sectors. So the entitlement process that you mentioned, metal pressings there.
Yeah.
I know you don't have to give me the full list, but what are the kind of companies that
get the relief,
are eligible for these refunds?
So things like metal pressings, heat treatment, metal plating, anodizing, forging, foundries, casting,
all the high energy use.
All the high energy.
See why you pick those selective associations. How have you found working with the associations? Obviously, you know, you've been doing it for a while now. How have you found it?
Yeah, it will be a cornerstone to how we acquire new business. But actually, to be honest, I don't really do it for new business. New business just comes on the back of it. It's more about staying in front of people who are already clients, who've been referred by those trade associations, and adding value to them and to their members. Really, I think it's a crowd. It's a crowded space like recruitment, isn't it? How many recruitment companies out there? Probably as many as there are energy brokers.
About 4, I think. Yeah, there's us and Hayes. Yeah, Michael Page. That's it. I think.
The reason that I like spending and investing time with those trade associations, it just, you've got an immediate point of difference to others, and you're sort of pre-validated before you hopefully have a conversation with them. And it could be, I've done lots of webinars for trade associations where that same person is on every single webinar that I do, but they're not interested in having a conversation. Cool. As long as we can add some value, and you take a bit of, I assume that you keep coming on it because you think what I'm saying is of value. But actually, if the chief exec of that trade association thinks I'm great because we've put content on for their members, that's the primary reason that they engage us to do those pieces.
I do love those people. Listen to absolutely everything, but never give you any business.
Or the worst thing is they listen to absolutely everything and then go and do something completely opposite.
Yeah. Work with someone else.
And then they won't admit. It must be the same as your game. And then they won't admit. Then they buzzed up. So you said, don't go and hire this bloke or whatever. They've gone and done it. 2 months later, he's walked out, and you're thinking, told you so.
Yeah.
It's the same as what,
Yeah, we have it where we don't even put them forward. And then they employ them. And I'm like, no, I did it last year for Christmas. I was like, told George, don't put that person forward, they're not right. Another agency put them forward, they took the person on. And I was like, everything he was after wasn't that. And then they're no longer in the business, and you're just like, well, they're mental anyway. Someone's looking for a dynamic person who's going to do all this and then employ.
Well, that's the same as the energy brokerage world, because who was, if one of your competitors, they've earned a fee out of that, the same as energy brokerage market, all they were bothered about is getting a fee. Is it the right thing for the client? No. Are they bothered? Probably not.
Well, I think you get that, don't you, with service provider jobs. I think because there's so much to go at. It's like us, we've got a good network. We think we know a lot of people within the sector, but then this morning I've picked up a job of a company I'd never heard of. And it's like, wow, I didn't even know you were not even on our database, nothing. And I think sometimes people have the short view as a service provider because they know they've got so much to go for. So it's almost like if I annoy 100 people, there's still and there's still thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, isn't there, to go at? So it's almost like they don't care, do they? It's so short-sighted.
Yeah, it's the old adage, isn't it? Throw enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem when there's commission structures involved with it, doing it, which is why we don't do none of that stuff. When you get that involved where it's a fee, it's a commission, it just creates a real toxic environment.
Yeah, I mean, some of these energy brokers, I'm sure, same as recruiters, they are literally living and dying by that fee, that commission.
Well, a lot of the businesses are targeting where it's such a short-sighted way, isn't it? You're only as good as your last month.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really every month they just got to keep doing whatever they got to do to keep their head above the water, really.
Yeah, same as energy brokerage market. Well, I say that it's the same as a good number of energy brokers. I always talk about there's some big energy brokers out there running big call centres. It's not the world we're ever going to get to.
I want to talk about advice for businesses that are high energy use. A lot of companies are now being pushed to go greener with their energy. You smile as I ask this question, and I know that there's a mix of energy providers, so you can say X amount of this was green, X amount of that was green, but I'm looking at CapEx and things for businesses where they might be going, right, we might want to put, say, solar in. We might want to drill, I don't know, a borehole or something to get some heat that way, or we might want to be invested in energy recovery systems because we've got furnaces and forgings, things like that. So do you get involved with giving advice to companies for that? And what kind of things are you seeing that are quite hot for businesses to do to kind of help with energy? Yeah,
in terms of the CapEx project work, not really. That's not our bag, but we do work with some partners who we feel trusted to refer to encourage people to have conversations with them. The reason I was smirking is I did another podcast on last Friday talking about some of this stuff. And I said last week, we did 8 electricity contracts. Not one of those were green.
Really?
Yeah, and I think this is, net zero is a hot topic, green's a hot topic, sustainability is a hot topic. But I think our typical businesses have lost the will. They're not interested. And they're not interested because it's at a cost.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
So the example I gave in this last podcast, so business a year ago was spending 200 grand a month on electricity. Now it's 45 grand a month. Great, jobs are good and we're saving whatever, there's 1.8 something million quid. To have a green contract was like another 50 grand for them a year.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? So unless, and supply chain is starting to put some pressure on it, but until it's mandatory, for typically our clients are going to be an SME business, 5 million, 200 million turnover business. Until they're mandated they have to buy green, it comes at a cost. Why would they? Now, some people, not everyone thinks like that. And you can have, we'd always have the conversation with the client about, do you need green and the merits of green and not? But it's still a cost-led conversation, I would say.
If you're in I don't know, the nuclear oil and gas sector or something, or whatever, where you're trying to promote it or having to be aware of it more for the supply chain.
Yep.
then you look at it and go, for 50k for us to promote it, make a big publicity about it, great. But if you're in something where it's, you're an SME business and it doesn't make any difference, no one cares in your supply chain if you promote it that you're all driving electric cars, you've got green energy. No, like, why would you do it?
Yeah,
and that's the way people look at it.
I do think that's probably where we're a bit different in that. Our typical client fits in that space, whereas lots of others are just jumping on the bandwagon, I would call it, but they don't really understand the importance of that to the end user.
Yeah.
If you've been smashed left, right, and centre in business, and that client there, if I can not pay 50 grand, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's until that changes, how can anybody who's setting any policy not understand that?
And for you as a broker, it matters not whether someone takes a green policy or a non-green policy. It's same money.
Doesn't matter. But it's about options again, isn't it? It's about that initial conversation with them, right? Is it fixed? Is it flex? What level of term? What contract structure? Green, brown? It's that initial fact finding and education piece that we spoke about right at the start, to then talk them through the merits of both and outline the cost difference between both. But I don't think, there's plenty of people who will just be putting green contracts out there to people because they think, as the broker or the advisor for them, that's the right thing to do. It may well be in their eyes, but it may not be in your client's eyes, and that ultimately is the eyes that matter, in my opinion.
What did you set the business up?
I don't know how much of that I can talk about on a podcast, Pete.
Yeah, you can. Come on.
I've set it up with a guy called Rich Clark, so as my business partner. We'd worked together for 8.5-ish years. It was always our intention to do it at some point.
Was it an intention or a dream? Like I always said, I want to work for myself, but I never really seen it happening. Did you really? Was that your real plan? You were going to do it?
We knew that it would happen. We didn't have a firm handle on when.
How quickly then? Do you say you'd known him for 8.5 years? So when did you kind of have that? We sat down in a pub, having a pint, and going, right, this is going to happen.
Probably 6 months or so before it did. Always started seriously saying we could do something, and then stuff was going on in the business, and
so it was like 6 months just so this
yeah,
last year.
Yeah,
I just meant like terms of like when you first kind of started getting to know each other. Did you both have that kind of we want to do this, and you were talking about it? Or did you not?
Probably not. I think it was probably maybe a bit of a pipe dream, actually, but I know lots of people, and I've spoken to both of you about this, that people in relationships is generally all that matters. Energy is sort of second nature, actually. And if you back yourself to win and retain clients, you're in a pretty good spot, and we have done that. So we've taken a good few clients with us, and we're taking even more and winning new business, which is good, nice place to be.
Yeah, well done.
How's it been since you started? Because I think that's the thing. People give you we'll give you a hand, or we'll have a conversation with you. But there's a difference between someone moving across. Were you confident that it would just work
without sounding like a complete arsehole? Yeah, because I'd worked with these people for a long time. We come back to the type of typical client that we're working with. We were speaking when we have a lunch, Pete, that a lot of this stuff is just it could be handshake deal, and that's what counts to our typical client. I had no doubt that if people said, "Yeah, we'll come with you when we're able to," more importantly, when we're able to, when restrictions ended, I knew that people would be coming with us.
Did you get that kind of, like when you've built relationships for a long time, they do become like mates, don't they? Yeah. Did you get the whole like, I'll come with you, but it's got to be like mates rates and like that? No, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, loads.
We used, I used to look at it and be like,
it's really annoying as well, isn't it? Like, just give us a hand.
Yeah,
but you'd be paying anyway. If anything, can you pay
do the
more?
opposite? Yeah, it should be. It should be.
It should be like we found it when we started. It was almost like I'd rather give someone I don't really know more money than you who have classed as a pal for 10 years. Like, completely the other way around.
Yeah, if you know me well enough and know the service we provide and you want to devalue it, I'm almost minded to say, I'm not interested, mate.
I know. We had it when we first started. There was like our first kind of 10 calls was people that we were like, and they were like mates, rates, all this. And you'd be like, but you're paying someone more already.
But the other way, though, we got business from people
we got good.
Yeah.
That's the difference. We were crap when we
started. We also got business from people that we didn't know at all, or it was almost like we set ourselves up, put our stall out of, right, this is what we want to do, and they came towards us and gave us business, and it was all fine. And you were kind of, you'd never, if you were writing down your list of like, these are going to be the first 30 accounts, there's probably more than half of them. You'd be like, well, I wouldn't have even put them there.
They're the ones who become your new pals, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's people who have gone out of their way to support.
Yeah,
which is brilliant. We had some clients who actually said they'd be willing and wanting to invest and inject cash into the startup.
Oh, yeah, we got loads of that at the start. Yeah,
but I know that's like, I think that's a good thing. That validates that actually.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm in a good spot here with the relationship with that person.
As a sector, there's so many like positives of the way, like you said there, shaking people's hand and it's a deal, saying you're going to do it, deliver it. None of this kind of, or especially when you're dealing with like SMEs, what you're saying there, because really what your market is, really that's our market.
Yep. Really,
we want to be dealing with anyone who's kind of from 5 million up to 100 odd million. Well, we deal with probably even more than that sort of them, aren't they? But if you're around that, like what you think you said, 200 million, there are people you can build really good relationships with, and you can do good business.
But
nice.
It's mainly because they're just good, genuine people.
A lot of them are built with the sales. They're built with the sales, like you say. It's I always find it's like the first gens are the easiest ones to deal with. It's when you start getting to what you were saying earlier, the third, fourth gens. God, that's when it becomes hard work. But that's a different podcast. We should do a podcast on generations. Do a podcast on first gens, then do one on third gens.
Or get one in, and you've got like gens. 3 or 4 generations in the same pod.
Rank which one we like the best at the end. Brutal.
The second gen will be the prick.
Oh dear.
Yeah, because you did a podcast with Liam before, didn't you?
I did.
For the Metal Magazine.
No, it was for our podcast, but yeah, it was because at that point, energy had just gone nuts, hadn't it? So it was particularly relevant at that point.
Which is what Liam's saying, it's really important now.
I think if you're selling a product, it's always important, isn't it?
Oh, he's done well to market himself now, hasn't he?
I think so.
Like he's become a metal specialist or manufacturing specialist for energy.
Well, he's the energy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the energy guy. I mean, that's the thing. If you look at it as a personal branding thing, it's brilliant. Yeah. He's gone around all the associations. He's networked with them. He's got big ins with loads of clients. They've done 1 year. I saw yesterday or something they posted about it, and they said they've worked with 72 companies within their first year of trading. So, fair play.
Yeah.
Fair play.
It's quite good how he gives a lot of information away for free as well on LinkedIn for anyone who doesn't follow him. It's like he does give away some good advice, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's not all about, solely his business.
Well, you've got to, haven't you? I think if you're trying to position yourself as an expert, which he obviously is in that sector, you need to talk with authority about what you do. Yeah,
but it's quite nice. So it's like in that podcast there, he's like very refreshing and he just gives it out. I think there's like a lot of people, especially saying metal stockholding, they don't want to talk openly about what they do. It's like, we've got to keep this to ourselves, don't want everyone knowing. It's like, well, you've got a laser machine, you've got this and that, you've got the same as most people. From what we're seeing now with people on LinkedIn, especially service providers, how much free information they do give out.
Yeah, it's to build that trust, isn't it, over a period of time. Look, there's plenty of things that Liam was talking about in this podcast that were the kind of standouts, and I'm hoping that people who've listened to the full podcast have taken something from it. But the thing that will be interesting to see how it changes with energy is the green energy. Liam, pretty bluntly, I mean, if you missed it, I don't know how you missed it, but he was saying, irrespective of how much money you're spending on energy bills, if you've got to spend more for the energy to be green, at the moment it's not legislated, that you're not being forced to do it. So it'd be quite interesting to see how that changes, I reckon, over the coming years, and particularly when people are winning contractual business, if there's going to be a green energy quotient that they need to kind of hit to be able to, to win that kind of work. Because at the moment, it doesn't seem to be the case. So, yeah, watch this space on that one. But for now, what are your thoughts on green? Would you pay that little bit extra?
Yeah, and give Liam a follow, because he's...
Yeah, he's a good egg.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
He is a good lad. But thanks for the sponsors, Steel Buy,
TW Mills,
and ourselves.
Content Group.
Feels weird sponsoring it yourself, doesn't it? But
everyone does it. Yeah, you got to, haven't you?
Next week...
Oh, yeah, the mighty Grant Adams, the head of automotive himself.
We think the Grant podcast, we tried to do a bit differently. So we've really gone to town on that, with the idea that maybe next season, depending on the type of guest that we get on, that we might have a slightly different format for doing some of these podcasts. So yeah, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of the podcast. Tune in next week for the Grant Adams story.
At Certec. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be... it was interesting to listen to, wasn't it? So yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy.
See you next week.